Things we wish Jesus hadn't said. My name is David Madison, the 14th of September 2019, and this is episode 20 in a series of flash podcasts on that topic. Mark Twain said that the best cure for Christianity is reading the Bible. So let's take a close look and see why Mark Twain was absolutely correct. I suspect most Christians would argue that the New Testament is better than the Old Testament, among other things because of so many grim, severe laws in the Old Testament. For example, there's the death penalty for working on the Sabbath. The Lord once ordered a man who had been caught picking up sticks to be put to death. There's the death penalty for children who curse their parents, and also for a woman who is found not to be a virgin on her wedding night. She is to be stoned. There are a lot of dietary laws as well that most people just ignore today. They don't make sense. They're silly. But the ancient priests who wrote all these laws were dead serious. And Christians want to believe that Jesus represents turning over a new leaf. Think again. In the Sermon on the Mount, supposed to be the gold standard of ethical teaching, we find these words of Jesus, chapter 5, verses 17 through 19. Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Well, how embarrassing. Jesus endorsed all the old laws? None of them could be annulled? But how can that be when Jesus himself supposedly said, in the very same chapter, Matthew 5, verses 38 through 39, you have heard that it was said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also. What's going on here? There are a few quick points I want to make. First, this Jesus quote that not even a stroke of a letter can be changed in the law is not found in Mark's gospel, from whom Matthew copied so much. In fact, Mark rarely mentions the content of Jesus' teaching. There is little ethical teaching in Mark. Second, this text about the permanence of the law is missing from John's gospel as well. Third, Luke tried to modify Matthew, but he doesn't make much sense. It sounds like he couldn't make up his mind. In Luke 16, verses 16 through 17, we read this, the law and the prophets were in effect until John came. Since then, the good news of the kingdom of God is proclaimed, and everyone tries to enter it by force. But it is easier for heaven and earth to pass away than for one stroke of a letter in the law to be dropped. Fourth and finally, Matthew probably just made this up. The gospel writers did a lot of that. The Apostle Paul had preached tirelessly that the Old Testament law no longer applied when it came to salvation. Believing in the resurrection of Jesus was what mattered. But there were plenty of people in the early Jesus cult who disagreed with Paul. They couldn't so easily wave aside the Old Testament, the old law. So Matthew invented this Jesus script to make it look like Jesus was on their side. But there are folks who insist that the words of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount have to be true. If that's the case, then we have to add Matthew 5, 17 to 19 to that long list of things we wish Jesus hadn't said.